the thing I take away from the last couple of days is a kind of, just even within hours of arriving and having conversations actually, is a lot of positivity about online content at the moment. I mean, content, I thought this industry was supposed to be on its knees, and yet you have many of the companies that I've met really confident that they can make a business. And I think some of the reasons behind that may be the arrival of devices, a lot of excitement about branded content as a funding mechanism, and then perhaps, you know, social as this big fire hose, this big traffic giver that all of you are very fortunate to benefit from, maximizing traffic. So to that end, we have 3 companies on the panel that are experts in amplifying content and trying to obtain the largest possible audience for it. We'll jump right in with Scott Button, co-founder and CEO of Unruly Media, which is an agency that visualizes branded films and content for companies, pumping it out to a network of, I think, 11,000 partner channels, something like that. Campaigns including Evian's Roller Babies and T-Mobile's Life's for Sharing flash mob campaign. And you also operate the viral video chart syndicated to the likes of the Guardian newspaper. So I think you probably know a thing or two about what makes a great viral video, how you make a video go viral. What's the recipe? I was speaking recently with the rights holder to Charlie Bit My Finger, who suggested it's basically kids and pets. What are you seeing? What's the ideal recipe?
Yeah, toddlers and kittens ain't bad. Why does that work? Because it creates a strong emotional connection with the viewer. So, you know, both of those categories make people feel warm and empathetic and gooey. So I mean, one of the things about how well video works online and sharing, it's actually a lot more predictable than people tend to think it is. You know, there's literature in the 50s on how intensity of emotional connection leads to, you know, the stronger the emotional connection, the more frequently people will talk about their experience and the more people they'll share that experience with. And online content is really no different. I know over the last couple of years, there's actually been some quite good studies by a couple of academic institutions, so Wharton and the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, looking at this with quite a large number of data points. And, you know, if you look at, you know, whether you say there's like 15, 16 basic emotions and maybe 20, 30 different emotional states, if you're optimizing for emotional connection with the viewer, then that's very, very likely to lead to improved shareability and improved word of mouth for the content. And actually, you know, emotional connection is something that you can kind of test for relatively easily during pre-testing phase. So right. there's a lot that brands can do to optimize for the social dimension of content.
Okay, Bran Harnevo, you founded 5 Min Media in 2007, a site serving instructional videos, and sold it to AOL in 2010. Therefore, you now lead the AOL On network as SVP of video with 14 channels, I think primarily comprising third-party content. You're not producing all of that content, something you share in common with Scott right now. Therefore, how do you viralize a video when you don't own it?
So, you know, the viral concept in general, I think, is very sexy and compelling to marketers and advertisers, but in reality, I think that viral, like when things go viral naturally, are almost miracles, right? It happens and we talk about it in conference, etc. But if you create a video and you don't really know how to put the video in front of enough people in scale, it wouldn't really amplify the thing that really need the video to get shared, etc. So if you know how to put it on the homepage of Buzzfeed, for example, you have a much better chance to make the video viral than if you're just uploading it to YouTube, which is kind of an agnostic platform. What we do with third-party content we believe in is that we know how to amplify and syndicate the content to hundreds and sometimes thousands of screens at the same time. So we work with a network of around 5,000 publishers. They're verticalized, and we know how to put the right content in the right context when it matters. And then if the video is good enough, it just happens by itself. Right. But I think that just, and we're agnostic to the original versus aggregated because our library is our library. But when you look at a video, and if your strategy is just putting it on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and try to make something happen out of it, you might be lucky, but most of the times you won't.
Right.
And you have a mechanism, if you have a mechanism where you can really put the video in context, in scale, then you have a much better chance that the video will just go out there.
Right, okay. So Jonah Peretti of Buzzfeed, you founded blackpeoplelovus.com, a popular parody site, as well as co-founded the Huffington Post, not a parody site.
I've never heard someone say I founded Black People Love Us. It's like that's big language for a little site, but.
And started Buzzfeed in 2006, very popular content network. People, we were just talking, people think Buzzfeed and they think cats. Some very enticing headlines like 7 photos of Syrian rebels hanging out with cats. That Gangnam Style is really just Illuminati propaganda. And I think, if I'm correct, Buzzfeed started out as a mechanism to surface content that was blowing up on other sites. So what does that algorithm look like? How do we identify in the early life cycle of a story or a piece of content when it's blowing up? What are the indicators?
So, I mean, I think that the reason viral is a good word is that epidemiology studies has mathematically modeled the way diseases spread, and there are similarities with how media spreads. I think the thing that you see in media is that most things have exponential decay. They don't have exponential growth, which is what everyone wants. They have exponential decay, which means they kind of curve like this and reach some asymptote. And so
could be said for the whole industry.
Yeah, and that's true for most things in the world. Like if everything grew exponentially and everything went viral, we would be just completely inundated with media, right? So what we look at is if you send 100 people to a piece of content, how many of those people then share it and pass it on? If it might be 100 goes to the 100 people share it with 50, and then 50 share it with 25, etc. That's sub-viral. That's decaying, but you're doubling your audience. And so I think the industry, the advertising industry, used to have viral marketing on one hand and CPM-based display on the other. And with viral marketing, it was unpredictable. You didn't know if it was going to work. It usually wouldn't work. It'd feel like a miracle when it worked. But when it did work, it was hugely spread to millions of people with very little money and didn't cost much. And the advertising, traditional advertising, was predictable. You could target it, you could do all these things, but you wouldn't get anything from social, anything from sharing. And now we're seeing those things come together in the middle, and you're getting kind of the best of both worlds, where people are making great content, and then they're managing that content to maximize the sharing that the content can get. And even if you don't consistently make an exponentially viral hit, you consistently can get something that has viral lift. And that's really the approach we take at Buzzfeed. Is measuring that and optimizing across a portfolio of content to maximize your viral lift. Right.
It seems to me that on the consumer end, something interesting has happened in terms of consumers like identities in social networks over the last few years, and that's that the act of liking something liking used to be a very private thing, but it's now become inseparable also from the act of sharing that thing. I mean, there's one big network, Facebook, where that is absolutely the case, and then it just feels like nowadays when we appreciate something, it's an automatic instinct to share it. Therefore, shouldn't the main imperative in producing content that you hope will be shared just to produce good content that people like?
So there's content that people like that they don't share, and there's content that people share that they don't even really like. So it is more tricky than that. Part of the reason I like to create content as well as distribute content is that you can change and shift the content based on the platform. So nude pictures of Rihanna, for example, is something that people do not post on Facebook and Twitter. Whereas if you look at Google search volume, huge search for nude celebrities, right? People say, well, if you wanted to go viral, why don't you have, porn or things like that? Well, you don't post on Facebook, I heard there was nude pictures of Rihanna. I have some time this weekend. Does anyone know where I can find those? Because you look like a sleazy guy. But there might be millions and millions of searches for nude pictures of Rihanna. Meanwhile, on Facebook, it's join me in helping the people of Japan recover from the tsunami. That's the status update you're going to face on Facebook because it's about your identity. It makes you look like a good guy. Now, I think people want to help the people of Japan and people want to see nude pictures of Rihanna, but people act differently in different contexts. And if you make content that matches a platform, you're going to have a lot more success getting distribution.
Right. We heard yesterday from David Kenny of the Weather Channel that they now have a system in place for when like America's next big hurricane breaks or in another country around the world, they have systems in place to cope with a big flood of traffic. And you might say Sandy was a viral instance that blew up in its own way. Do you guys have to consider that in your distribution systems as well, coping with a big influx of traffic that presumably can spike and dip depending on the relative popularity of a piece of content?
So the answer is totally yes. And I think that there's another element in content creation, which is real time. And when I say real time, like in Sandy, we work with over 1,000 content producers. And when something happens and our content lives on HuffPost and on other sites that are Chicago Tribune, some of the New York Times, the editors want the content as fast as they can. And sometimes they'll get content which is half-baked or not amazing, but if they can take it live and have the reaction with their consumers immediately, they wouldn't wait for a much better piece that is well more kind of thoughtful and organized. They would probably sometimes replace the content, but what we realize is that from a content creation standpoint, we're seeing more and more content creators moving to real time, which is harder, by the way, in video than in text, because in text you can react really fast. Yeah. And in video, you got to have a reasonable production quality, but time becomes a big measurement, by the way, also for the social graphs of the video. And what we've learned from a social perspective is that being first in social networks make people very proud. So, if we take the content and we take it live really, really fast, when we have big events, we're seeing the social magnitude spikes almost with no regard to the quality of the content, because people really like to say, hey, here is a video that you need to consume on the matter. And even if we afterwards bring much better content that people couldn't react to fast enough, we can promote it on our homepages but on search and on social, which sometimes really tie together, because if a video goes social, it gets a lot of links, therefore it goes up on the search graph really fast. We're seeing real time as a really important mechanism.
And this is one of the things actually that's very challenging for brands. So you can get emotional connection right, you can understand social motivation and how content plays into self-identity, but the zeitgeist element, so trying to respond to events or phenomena as they're occurring is really, really challenging for a major brand. They're not used, neither they nor their agency nor their legal department, they're not used to creating or even just even simple text responses. It's a challenge for a brand to respond fast enough to be able to benefit from the kind of sharing and conversation that's happening around events in real time.
I mentioned earlier that for publishers, it feels like social is just this amazing gift that can bring everybody so much traffic. To what extent do you think that is the case, and we should celebrate social? How much energy should publishers put into courting these new networks to find readers?
I think it's the most important thing. I think the industry is realigning around social, and that when you look at some of the things that used to get traffic in the world of search, it's pages with all these keywords stuffed in, and people writing for what is people writing for Google's robot instead of for other humans. And there's a real problem with that, because if you create a story for Google's robot, it encourages people to rewrite other people's stories, to pack them with keywords. The robot can't tell what the original piece of content is or where the authoritative one is. Meanwhile, on Twitter, if a reporter breaks a scoop, his peers or her peers will retweet that and give credit to the reporter and say, this is the authoritative piece, this is the important piece. And so humans are just a better judge of good quality content than a robot ever can be, or an algorithm could be. So I think that social has been this great gift for reporting, and it's been it's been something that every publisher needs to embrace, because it will make their content better and will make their business better.
So sorry, go ahead.
And there's not a real conflict there between a social strategy and a search strategy. I mean, the search algorithms have always tried to, benefit articles that are happening earlier, those with most authority, and they're also just trying to respond to the sorts of stuff that people are searching for. But social kind of makes this real in a way, because it's people. Not machine behavior that needs to get optimized for, but creating great content early, that optimizes equally well both for social and for search.
And I would also say that I think that we have kind of two kind of publishers. There's a lot of publishers that are focused on more evergreen topics.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, that Panda did a good job lately in identifying who's creating. Like, I think we're seeing better search results for the evergreen part of the web in the last 12 months or so, since Google changed their algorithm. And I think that if you're doing evergreen content, and this is what you're good for, either as a brand or as a publisher, if you're more focused in health or in food, in things that are less sexier, but are really searchable and people are going for there, you're going to have less social volume by definition, because your content is not real time, it's not entertaining, there's nothing really about seeing it first that really helps you. And I think this type of publishers will probably be more search friendly than social friendly. And then the rest of it, which is news and entertainment and really content that makes people react and not just informational stuff, I think social just changed the total ecosystem for this kind of publishers, because finally they have a way to amplify through human beings that are really engaged with the content. But I would divide, I think.
I think that's a really important distinction, although I disagree a little bit with some of the implications you're drawing from that. So when we talk about social or we talk about viral, it's really easy to get fixated on the really big hits, whether it's Charlie Bit My Finger or it's Nevi on Roller Babies. But there's lots of evergreen content that's really social too. So actually, if you think of some of the most shared content online, so music videos is really big, and that's not just what's cool this week. It's stuff from if you're around in the 90s, you're sharing videos from the 90s too. One of the most shared videos is actually just the chipmunks singing Happy Birthday. Now that ties into a social motivation, it's social grooming. You send that to somebody because it's their birthday. But that's kind of classic evergreen content and that's been one of the most shared videos, like the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I know that, for example, in big media, the Telegraph newspaper has got really good at producing articles for the topics that people are searching for. Really, you see good visibility of evergreen topics like gardening how-tos. And there seems to be something about the way that we're using technology in production of journalism and so on now that introduces this really great sort of systemic quality. No story goes unread. No wastage, very efficient system, because you're writing to be read, you're writing for what people are searching for. But is there a danger of going too far down that road? I mean, is it a bit the tail wagging the dog? Traditionally, journalism was a bit more, for example, journalism. It's not the only kind of content, but journalism, for example, has been about a set of people finding out issues and publishing them because this is something you must read, even though you don't necessarily know that you want to read it. That's serendipity. If you're producing content because people want to read it, isn't that an entirely different kind of model?
Yeah, I mean, we have a large team of journalists who work at BuzzFeed, reporters who work at BuzzFeed, and they don't look at all at search, and they focus entirely on telling people something they didn't know, getting a scoop, getting access to new information, and you can't optimize a scoop because it's not out there yet. Nobody knows it yet. It's new. It's something that is inherently new. And so once that is published, that in general, things that are a scoop will get lots of pickup, but will get Twitter traffic, it will get Facebook traffic, it will get shared. It might get shared widely or with a certain group that cares about it, but there's no way to optimize it because there's no history for it, and it's something that is new, and that is something that social really opens up, and I think why reporting will have a brighter future now that the world has moved from portals to search to social, and it's hard to think of good journalism in an SEO context where you're writing for the demand of what people are searching for.
But it seems like there's a bunch of sites that are now doing this really well. Buzzfeed may be one of them. Ali Insider, Mail Online seem to have this knack of producing the kinds of content that many people, though not all people, really want to read, that appeals to people on a particular kind of level. And that tactic seems to be seeping into other media. For example, last week I saw Business Week ran this story, vote for your top 10 hottest chicks in business school or something, which
That's why they're stopping to print.
That's quality investigative journalism. Come on.
So,
but you might say it's a tactic borrowed from a certain subset of online content site that jarred for me because it wasn't necessarily something I expected of that brand. I might have expected it from Ali Insider, which I love, but not necessarily Business Week.
I'd say that I was a journalist for 4 years, so I have kind of an emotional empathy for the difficulties that journalism is experiencing lately. I think you should find the fine line. Like having data and understanding what people want to read and then reacting to it is not a bad thing. Unless you stretch the line, unless you're starting to just service the demand with supply that is just too suited to it. But I think that in general, the fact that print never had data and now we can use data to create more engaging stories is not bad. I agree with you, sometimes we cross the line. And I also think that journalism, I mean, if you write for BuzzFeed or for HuffPost or for AOL.com, you know you're going to have your readers as soon as you release the story. And then the amplification of the story is kind of natural. I think that today when you create content, it's almost that content creation as a business have changed because it's not only about the content you created, it's also about discoverability. And that's really, really important for people that create content. How are you getting discovered? I mean, I think if you look at the 3 companies that we are kind of working at, there's a lot of discoverability in it. Like we're really, really busy in exposing the right story to the right audience. And I'm seeing, like, if you have the scoop and you're in a blog and all you do is just to release your scoop in a blog, it might get lost. People might not just see it. So you gotta be, as a content creator, you gotta be very conscious on how do you get your content to be discovered on the right platforms, in the places that people are really working at. And you have creators and you have curators, and the curators need to know about the creators because creation is exploding. And eventually the curators would put content that their audience likes because they have data. So you gotta work with both of them in order to really massively distribute.
So can any content become an epidemic? Like, can this morning's Wall Street Journal story about the fiscal cliff blow up in that sense, or does content need to be conceived virally to go virally?
Well, I mean, possibly within its target audience. I mean, whether you're a media outlet or you're a brand, and of course those two things are beginning to converge. A kind of an attention to a consideration of one's target audience, and one's brand as a media outlet or as an advertiser. So having content aligned with that, Jonah made the point quite well at the beginning. I mean, if all of this stuff was genuinely viral, an epidemic to the extent that people think it is, we would all have seen everything, and that's not true. Even if the really biggest viral phenomena, whether it's user-generated content or brand content, usually in any room, only a half or a third of people will have seen the actual item that you're talking about. So it's traveling around within groups, within subcultures, and that can that subculture, that subgroup can be very large, or it can be relatively small. And in terms of tail wagging dog, yeah, sure, you see this with branded content too. There have been plenty of occasions where the primary consideration has been for social and how the content will get shared. Not enough consideration has been paid to, well, where does the brand sit within the narrative? What's the benefit to the brand going to be? How well is it aligned? And there's been, one of the big myths around branded content as well is that you have to be quite sly or quite subtle with the brand, i.e., it not be there very much in the content. So there's lots of cases of content that's been very, very successful online, but has given almost zero benefit to the brand because people are sharing the content for the content, and the content's not giving any cues about the brand, and that's really critical. If you're wanting to get any sales benefits out of this, the content has to cue up conversations about the brand, and the way in which this works, the reason that this works, is that it causes conversations about the brand, and so it gives you a hook. If you're in a group of people, it gives you a hook to start talking about Coke or about Pepsi or about Evian or Vittel, and then you start talking about the product or the brand, and you stop talking about the content. But if that transition doesn't happen, then there's very little benefit to the brand.
When brands try to leverage this content, we talked earlier about conceiving something deliberately to go viral. They seem to borrow a lot of the aesthetics of content that has perhaps accidentally gone viral. I'm seeing several TV campaigns at the moment which mimic the piece to camera instructional makeup how-tos, product reviews that amateurs are putting out there on YouTube, and we see big brands come up with a slick faux fake piece to camera. Does that really work? Isn't that somewhat inauthentic?
It's also a misunderstanding of why content works. That's about form. So it's easy to, whether it's, wobbly camera, lo-fi, whether it's CCTV, whether, or what, that's all about form. And form actually, fundamentally doesn't matter. That's the easiest stuff to copy. It's the easiest stuff to get right. But the formal stuff actually has no bearing really whatsoever on, why people love content, why people hate content, why people share content.
But isn't that what you did with the T-Mobile Life's for Sharing campaign that you distributed, which, if I recall correctly, was a flash mob in a London train station, but conceived not by the crowd, but by T-Mobile? How does that sit well with this kind of notion of the accidental happening?
Well, so that's a really nice example. So, this is a really big campaign that Saatchi and Saatchi created, and there was nothing accidental about it at all. They were shooting for an entire day at Liverpool Street. They did 11 takes, so on the hour, every hour. So they had, a bunch of content that they could then assemble from. There's nothing accidental. And even if you think about the form of that, it's not like. You watch it, it looks deliberately orchestrated. There's lots of, cutaways or close-ups. It's classic content creation. It's much more akin to popular TV content than it is actually to lo-fi UGC content you might find on YouTube.
On a similar note, one of the ways that you distribute brand videos for marketers is to incentivize bloggers to embed these through paying them. If this notion works, why incentivize them by handing them cash?
Ultimately, that's about audience access. You get bigger audience access if there's paid media behind it, and actually getting that audience access, whether it's through paid media, whether it's through PR, whether it's through media that you own and control, is really, really critical, not just from a timing point of view, because without that, it becomes purely accidental when something might blow up. But also, again, to Jonah's point, things don't blow up to the extent that the words like, epidemic or contagion or viral cascade might make one think. What one gets from sharing, from conversation, both online and offline, is an amplification effect on the paid media. So you're seeing a shift, if one is executing a TV campaign, one might invest 10% of the money in content and 90% on media, and you can shift that. So it's a good online content strategy where the content has been optimized for social. That might look more like 50-50. But the idea that it can be just 100% content investment and then just good stuff happens, that never works, that never flies. Right. There's got to be something that's giving you the initial audience access that then the amplification is happening from. And then, you get the decay, over 30 days or whatever. But you've got, maybe half the media you've got there is free. Right. And that media that you have got that's free is generating lots of word of mouth. And, that's the value in it.
I also think that for brands, being in dialogue with the culture of the web is really important. So the format you use should depend a lot on where the content is appearing. So on BuzzFeed, Virgin Mobile is a client, for example. Yeah. And when they had an Android phone and Instagram was coming to Android, so at that moment they created 27 things that you shouldn't post on Instagram, and presented by Virgin Mobile or posted by Virgin Mobile, where they're creating content where it's a list of images that felt really at home on BuzzFeed. It was in the moment, like you were describing before, where they reacted to something in the zeitgeist, and it got hundreds of thousands of organic views of people sharing it. And the majority of the traffic came organically, not through paid media. For Toyota, we did the 20 coolest hybrid animals for Toyota Prius. So which hybrids are cool? Look, the Toyota Prius is a cool car, and the Liger is a cool hybrid animal, and the Doncora, and that was something that got shared and also engaged the culture of the web. So I think there's a sense of playing with formats and speaking a language, but doing it from your own voice, and I think that definitely increases the chance of something spreading and getting earned media.
So BuzzFeed is changing a little bit and is growing up. You have an editor-in-chief from Politico, I think, and you were recently covering the US election campaign, and now you're moving into long-form journalism, hiring an editor from formerly from Spin. How do you reconcile these kinds of, if you might say, like sort of professional or conventional content with the other stuff? And on the topic of long-form, I thought the adage was that people don't want to read long-form content on the web.
People are getting everything through social now. If you look in your Facebook newsfeed or your Twitter newsfeed, you'll see your Twitter stream. You'll see a long-form story. You'll see something about the Arab Spring. You'll see your friend getting drunk. You'll see pictures of your nephews or nieces and babies. You'll see funny internet memes all mashed together. We like to think of it as like a Paris cafe. You show up at a cafe with a copy of Sartre, a copy of Le Monde, and there's a cute dog underneath the table that you pet. You maybe flirt with someone at the next table. People like to have all of their media mashed together, and that's what's happening on the social web. And BuzzFeed's approach is to say, why not just do that at the source as a publisher, and not not just let the Facebook and Twitter mash it together where there's a serious site next to a fun site, next to a humorous site. Right. Just do that at the source and make all the different kinds of content that humans like and that make us human.
Do you have any learnings or metrics to share from covering the campaign? What worked, what didn't?
Scoops work, telling people new stuff, basic journalism. We had people on Romney's plane, and we had Michael Hastings covering the Obama campaign, getting new information that people don't know and telling the public about it. It's just very old school kind of reporting ethics.
Okay. Anyone out there have any comments, questions, or thoughts? If we have a roving mic, is there a mic? Yeah, over there.
Hey, I have a question for you about the art of the headline and the thumbnail and how that plays into driving things viral, or if it still does.
I think it absolutely does. I think the biggest difference, though, is that there was a period where you could trick people, where you'd write a misleading headline and get a click, and that would be a page view, or you would put words in your headline that would drive search traffic. With social, you can't really do that, because if somebody clicks on a headline and they don't get what they expect, they're not going to share it. They're going to be upset and not share it. So I think it's good in that it's getting harder and harder for people to use misleading tactics with thumbnails and headlines, because you need to actually deliver on your promise if you want someone to share something on the social web.
Because you're not just after a piece of traffic; you're after someone actually spending time on the site, and same whether you're a publisher or a brand here. Just getting someone to click through once, there's no benefit in that whatsoever. It's about engaging the audience and creating some kind of experience that's important to them. So we optimize in real time, and I know BuzzFeed do the same on marketing campaigns, one is constantly testing the creative asset, but the key creative asset that we are testing is actually the video itself. So we might have several cuts of a video, or we might have several alternative videos, and so we'll test to see which one works best for a given audience or for a given site. But that's actually testing the content. It's not testing cosmetic details on the front end, trying to get people then to watch something, kind of whether they want to or not.
Anyone else? No? Okay, so I'd like to just close out by saying, you guys are at the coal face of identifying hot new content that might become big. So what's the next hot new web video that no one else here knows about yet?
Oh, damn it.
Just to give you a good content that already exists.
It exists, but we don't necessarily know it yet.
Have you seen Wigs?
So
Yeah? All right, so a part of YouTube's production. I mean, YouTube spent $100 million last year. They just announced they're spending $150 next year. And they actually went short form. Most of the content was very web oriented. One of their projects was totally going against it, which was Wigs. They took Hollywood producers. It's oriented towards women. It's long form. So it's around 15 minutes scripted, which everyone on the web would tell you scripted doesn't work and too expensive. And it just hits the roof. They're building their audience. I think they're getting to 1 million subscribers. And it's really good, high quality content, so check it out.
Okay, Scott?
Well, newness is always relative to audience, right? So one thing I'm just going to flag because I love it. So if you don't know Potato Head Jesus, just Google Potato Head Jesus. It's an image meme. It's very, very funny. From a brand point of view, watch out what Evian does this year. It's will be 4 years now since Roller Babies, and I think they've got something big planned for this year.
Okay.
I think what's so exciting about this field is that it always surprises you. So you can predict with a very high degree of accuracy whether something will be big once it's been live for a couple hours. Like we have a data science team that does machine learning and builds regression models. And after something has been published for a few hours, they can say, this is going to be huge and get millions of views.
Right.
But before it's published, the ability to predict is incredibly poor. You can take the best editor, you can take the smartest math person, you can look at formal qualities, you can natural language elements, and there's things that are slightly predictive, but you really just can't tell whether something's going to be big.
Okay.
Once it's out there and audiences are looking at it, you can make really good predictions. So
we have to be real time.
You kind of have to be real time to know.
Or you use, you can use panel-based methodologies in terms of pre-testing. That's also possible. But yeah, you need people to actually watch the stuff because it's about the human being and human connection with the content.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Time to wrap up. Thank you.